Welcome back to the Real News Network. This is segment 3 with Sinclair Thompson. We're talking about Bolivia and the new constitution. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Let's talk about this constitution for Bolivia and the impact this is going to have on the region.
Okay.
Recently, there was a meeting in Chile where Bolivia and support for Evo Morales, the president, was discussed at a meeting, and where most of the Latin American leaders gave him unconditional support to continue to do what he's doing in Bolivia.
Yes. That was in September. UNASUR met. This is one of the new kind of regional organizations that's been formed in South America, and part of the new regional integration that's really shifted the international balance of forces. The Morales government was under fire from the right in the lowland regions of the country, and there was an incident in Pando in which some 20 supporters of Evo Morales were massacred. And the neighboring countries intervened and expressed support for the Bolivian government, and this was actually very decisive in shifting the political momentum in Bolivia. That opened up the possibility for negotiations between the government and the right, and it led eventually to the consensus agreement for the Constitutional Assembly. I think what's important to see is that the international context is very different today. You have center-left governments around the region who are in support of the government. The right-wing opposition lacks that kind of international support that they've enjoyed historically. The United States, who in the past would have been the natural ally for the right in Bolivia, is no longer the player that it once was.
Let's back up a little bit.
Sure.
Beyond generally people noticing that there's a leftward swing in Latin America with the election of, let's say, President Lula in Brazil, Kirchner, and now Mrs. Kirchner, and also Hugo Chavez, and so on. There is a leftward trend. But beyond that, there are some real issues that these governments are facing that Evo Morales is epitomized in Bolivia in a sense. And so what is it that they are binding together around here?
I think that there are basically two things that they're reacting against. One is the hegemony of the neoliberal model has come into question, and all of these governments are looking to reassert the state and its role in managing the economy and increasing national sovereignty vis-a-vis the great external power in the region historically, which is the United States. So there's a real rejection of U.S. control in the region.
The formation of UNASUR itself is a significant...
It's a sign of these shifting political currents.
What is UNASUR?
UNASUR is a South American union which allows different countries to deliberate on its common interests. But it's a very recent initiative, along with some of the other proposed financial and development initiatives. Chavez himself has been instrumental in creating some of these instruments. And in September of last year, UNASUR met in Chile, and President Bachelet was at the head of the meeting, which issued the statement in support of the Bolivian government. I think that with this constitution, Bolivia enters into a new era. And given the transition in government in the United States, there's also a possibility of a new era in relations between the United States and Bolivia and the region.
And what are the ways in which the new administration here in the United States can take advantage of this opportunity, this endorsement, the new constitution? What are some of the ways in which they can move forward, perhaps open a new chapter with its relations with Bolivia and Latin America as well?
Well, the U.S. government is not going to be able to go according to business as usual. The kind of unilateral influence that it's exercised throughout the 20th century can no longer be reconstituted, I think. You have new regional powers in Brazil, new kinds of international integration, which prevent that kind of thing from happening. So they'll need to recognize this new reality, and they'll need to be able to engage with these countries, recognizing the claims to sovereignty, which are now being expressed more forcefully than ever. In the case of the Andes, the U.S. has mainly been interested in the war against drugs. And so it's a time for the U.S. to reevaluate all of its policies about interdiction of coca and cocaine, militarization of the region in order to enforce U.S. control over the region. And the Bolivian government of Evo Morales is the perfect one with which to create a new kind of partnership. Bolivia has expelled the DEA, and it has expelled the U.S. ambassador, so it's a time in which diplomatic relations need to be reconstituted. It'll be important for the United States as well to be much more transparent in its relations in the region. The U.S. Development Agency, USAID, has been spending money in places like Bolivia, but in ways which are not publicly divulged. And there is evidence that USAID has been funding opposition groups in the country. So it's important for the U.S. to come clear about how it's spending its taxpayers' money in the region. There's concrete evidence from USAID documents that they wanted to fund opposition groups to provide a counterbalance to the MAS party, which it saw as on the rise. There's other evidence of meddling in internal affairs. The case of a U.S. Fulbright scholar and also Peace Corps representatives from the U.S. who were told by the chief of security of the U.S. Embassy to spy on Cubans and Venezuelans in the country. This kind of thing is completely unacceptable.
And the only measure taken on the part of the Bolivian government was to expel the ambassador. Is there other measures that was put into place that might have to be undone by the Obama administration?
Well, there will need to be a new ambassador. There will need to be some kind of, if the U.S. will have to negotiate with Bolivia about the DEA, Bolivia would far prefer to work out some kind of regional agency to combat drug trafficking rather than rely on the DEA. I'm sure Evo Morales would prefer not to renew any kind of ties with the DEA. But USAID we may see some renegotiation of relations with the USAID. There are some popular sectors in the country which are interested in getting development funds. Coca growers in the Yungas region of the country want to continue to work with USAID, even though coca growers in the Chapari region say, we want USAID out of our territory. So it's a time
Is there support for what Evo Morales is putting forth in terms of a regional apparatus to deal with the...
It's under discussion, and Brazil would obviously be interested in that kind of thing. They share a border, and I think that there's goodwill and favorable intentions on that front, although it's still incipient.
Thank you for joining us. This is going to be an ongoing discussion with you, because we really want to keep reporting on what is happening in Bolivia. It's a bit of a gem in Latin America. So I hope you join us again.
It's my pleasure to talk with you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.
Donate today and receive a new documentary film available to members of the Real News Network. The History of the National Security State with legendary author Gore Vidal. Bonus features of the DVD include an in-depth response to Vidal from ex-CIA analyst Ray McGovern, who served under 7 U.S. presidents, an exclusive interview with Colin Powell's former Chief of Staff Larry Wilkerson, and an insightful interview with oil policy analyst Antonia Juhas.
The news magazine of the screen. Living glimpses of history in the making.
Hollywood and Washington is a symbiotic relationship. They both deal with illusions. Reality doesn't often play much of a part. I think I saw through the myth of the Cold War almost from the beginning. I was a Washington political kid from a political family. Roosevelt first had radio because he had this great speaking voice and everyone liked to hear. Truman proceeded to break every arrangement that Roosevelt had set up for a peaceful coexistence. And Truman thought that it would be a good idea. Why not just stay armed all the time? And then he devised the national security state. You've got to go up and swear allegiance to the United States or else you're a commie. I mean, we had imported fascism. We get Dwight Eisenhower, who said that we have this great military industrial complex. It is a dangerous thing. And he said this is going to change everything. And the way our country's governed is going to change us politically. Along comes Jack Kennedy, who wanted to make his mark, believed in the Cold War. But he said in this kind of politics, it is the appearance of things that matters. I think everybody should take a sober look at the world about us. The national security state still exists, only it isn't communism anymore, it's terrorism. This is the most serious thing that has happened in the history of the United States. Knowledge is power. We need an honest news system.
We need the real news.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Make a tax-deductible donation now of at least $10 a month or a one-time give of at least $75. As a thank you for your support, we will send you the new documentary film, The History of the National Security State.